The last item on the agenda is a report on community branding with both Jen Piffner and Gina Truschio.
Hello again. Beginning back on January 17th, an initial meeting was hosted by the Chamber, the Best Western, and the University of Idaho, I think in some regards, to present, or to let Roger Brooks from Roger Brooks International present on a community branding idea. At that meeting, we had the Chamber of Commerce. Gina Truschio was there. Melanie Zimmer, one of the Chamber's members, was there. And those two, along with Cammie McClure from the University of Idaho, have really kind of spearheaded this effort to get this community branding idea considered to see, what potential it may have in our community. Other participants included University of Idaho representatives, and that would be like the interim President Don Burnett, Chris Murray, and several people from his staff. And then from the City of Moscow, we had Mayor Lambert, Councilmember Walter Steed was there, Gary Riedner, myself, and there were several others as well in the room. So I tell you all of that because this is a project that, since that meeting that day and subsequent follow-up meetings, all of those people have continued to attend or continue to be engaged and are excited about the idea of this community branding prospect. So what we talked about at January 17th, which was then discussed at some follow-up meetings, was Mr. Brooks provided an overview of community branding and how to develop a cohesive community brand. And when we talk about brand, we're not talking about a logo, we're talking about what you're known for. He spoke specifically about how several communities may say we have a great quality of life. Any community can really say you have a great quality of life, but drilling down further into that and finding what it really is about you, your community, that you can talk about and attract people to your area with that message as well. He talked about a process that had, I think, a lot of pros and cons for us. There was a lot of doing an assessment, doing the research, public input, reviewing that public input, reporting out, to kind of get to that place where you find the one thing that makes you special, and it can't be all things that make you special. So he gave it kind of a case history of several places he's worked with that gave a really good insight into how that comes together. Since that time, we've had 2-3 meetings now where folks have continued to discuss, okay, is this something we want to pursue for our community? Is this something we're invested in? There's been discussion about putting together an RFP, which is the next step in the process, and I'll let Gina speak to that in a moment. Folks that are being represented there, specifically the city, the university, and the chamber, have tentatively said, well, we could perhaps contribute financially in the amount of about $10,000 to get this program started, and more information about that amount and how it could come together would be fleshed out in the scope of services with the request for proposals and things like that. And, of course, any funds that would come from the city would go through the council to be approved and whatnot. So the next step is to put together that RFP in the next couple of weeks.
Next couple of days.
There you go. Which would then come back to the council, to the committee, and then council for their full review, and probably with a recommendation to look at funding the project in the amount of $10,000. And I'll let Gina speak to the RFP and her grant process and some other things that she's got as well.
Good afternoon. It's really exciting to be here. This is a very, very fun project. We have, and I don't know how many of you know this, but we are awarded a yearly grant from the Idaho Tourism Council, and it's basically the state of Idaho collects the 2% bed tax on all of the lodging in our areas, and it all goes down to the Department of Commerce, and then grantees make application for the money, and we received a $73,000 grant this year. So we're pretty excited about that to start with. But this is, in our estimation, the right time. We have the right people at the table and willing to consider developing a brand that we could use not only to bring tourists in, but also to recruit students and businesses and new people coming into our community. So it really is a great time. And so I made an amendment to our grant today. I'm crossing my fingers and holding my breath that it gets approved this afternoon. And when that occurs, we'll actually have just under half of that grant to put towards this effort. And I'm in the process, so doing the RFP, and that's a request for proposals from about 8 8 or 9
so.
different entities that have done these sort of branding efforts before, including Mr. Brooks and his company. But then I'm also speaking to comparable cities and chambers with universities mixed in to see who they've used and if they've done this before. And it's been a really interesting conversation thus far. The data, we are a little bit of in a moment of inventing the wheel. Very few communities have all three entities interested and or at the table. So this is pretty cool. And for Idaho, we would be the first one doing this. So I just am really, really optimistic about it. So, yeah, it's pretty exciting.
So the chamber will put in 10?
So we'll probably put in between 25 and 30.
Oh, okay, so that's when you said about half of your grant?
Yeah, yes, sorry, yes, sir.
What's the total cost you think going to be on this then?
You know, there was a range between $65,000 and $95,000, but we've spoken with Mr. Brooks, and if we use him specifically, he's willing to kind of do a little bit of an a la carte thing where we can say, no, we don't need that community survey. What we need is this and this and this and this instead. So, and we won't pass up the surveys. Those are the good data moments. But, you know, we'll pass up some of the preliminary things that we have already done and go for something, I would think, more maybe in the range of 45 to 60. And that's a really,
That's the goal.
It's a guess, but that is the goal.
And funding levels from the city and the University of Idaho?
Are the same at $10,000 anticipated.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That was, and I like the idea. I think it's probably well past time that we need to, it's a small community still with some big entities, and if we can get all of them working together and with the input and have everybody's got a little skin in the game.
Yes, sir.
I think we can come up with something that will be unique to our town. I've been here so long, I still remember when Moscow was the city with a smile.
All right.
And then it
Heart of the arts now.
Heart of the
Heart of the
arts.
arts.
And all of those things after a while they have a shelf life.
Yes, sir.
And it's time that we come up with something, and then also include the university, and if we can get some county people, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think it was in the mid-'80s when Clarkston had billboards that said, Clarkston, the other Palm Springs.
Wow. It's bold.
Yeah, that was bold. I
2 people moved to Clarkston.
think they had palm trees on their billboard.
Oh, that's funny.
Wow.
Yeah, I should have taken a picture of it at the time. So when I think of branding in the area, and I've raised this question to a few people that I've heard talking about this, and I think it should be part of the conversation, because when I think of the Palouse and branding, I think of the Palouse Knowledge Corridor as an effort to brand this area as, you know, the 2 closest state universities in the country, 2 dynamic cities engaged in activities and so forth. I think it's going to be important, as long as the Palouse Knowledge Corridor is still a brand that we want to push forward. Assuming that, then we should probably figure out how this exercise fits in with that, so that it all kind of makes sense. So, for example, if if Durham wanted to brand itself,
Sure.
they would not say, oh, we're now not part of the Palouse Knowledge Corridor. They would
Right.
figure out how whatever they're doing still works with the research triangle. And they're not saying TRT, the research triangle. They're not, like we say PKC because we're all insiders or whatever. I think we need to never say PKC again, because it's confused with KFC, and it's confused with
point.
PKP, which is the Communist Party of Poland. And I just think we need to, if we're going to be known internationally for the Palouse Knowledge Corridor, we should use the full name and not the acronym anymore. But so I think when I think of this, branding, I think it's really exciting. And then how does it fit in with other things that we do as a community so that we're not contradicting ourselves.
Right. And I think that would be a huge part of the process, is looking
Yeah.
at all of these things.
Exactly. I mean,
And
kind
they
of-
don't go away,
Right.
but how do we want to enhance?
Yeah, and how does the
foundation.
conversation work so that we're picking up all these different pieces, because there are so many different, and, there's so many things to do. I mean, I was telling Jen earlier, and I just have this feeling, it seems like every night I can do something in Moscow and have 3 things to do, and, my schedule is always in conflict with itself, because there's just so much going on here, and it's an exciting place to live, and
You
we
know,
need to let
start
people
doing
know
something
about
during
that.
the day.
I know.
You need to start during the day, you won't have as much to do at night.
There's stuff to do. Anyway, I think this is a really neat idea. I think we all
Great.
like to see this moving forward. I don't, figuring out the specifics are
We'll be
gonna
back with
important.
specifics.
Yeah,
As we get closer to it, definitely.
great.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's the last thing on the,
Item
well, I
on
know
our
it's the last
agenda.
thing on the agenda, so I believe we are now adjourned.
We're done.